Are talking about people pleasing at work when our employees say yes, but it's really a stress response. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Megan Wollerton and I run Life Force Wellness, and I'm certified in a bunch of different things in health and wellness, including personal training, health coaching, nutrition coaching. And I work with individuals one on one to help them with their health and wellness goals. And I also work with organizations and specifically leadership and how do we create healthier, happier workplaces. The last 5, 6 years, I've really dove into mental well being. So, getting my SHRM mental health ally certification, as well as my positive psychology certification and change psychology. So, I'm bringing in these concepts because I personally, as a personal trainer, would see a lot of my clients talk very negatively about themselves. I'm never going to lose this weight. I'm never going to be able to lift that. I'll never be able to break my time. Whatever it is that they were working for, there was just a lot of negativity around their thought patterns. And that's what really made me want to study positive psychology. And as I got into back into corporate America and working with people and organizations, I started to see those same patterns come up. And so I've really dove into stress management and that change psychology to help leaders better understand their people and where they're coming from. Now, I did not always work in health and wellness. In fact, the first 6 years of my career was spent in the oil and gas field industry, where I was on call 24/7, working 60 to 100 hours a week. So I understand what it is to be burned out. I understand what it is to not have boundaries. And quite honestly, I worked in a pretty toxic culture where saying no or making a mistake was just not accepted. And I know what that felt like from firsthand experience, but it's still something that I see in a lot of my clients. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. When you have an employee who never says no, on the surface, it can seem like a really great thing. You might have that person and you're going to go to them and say, "Hey, can you take this on?" And they're just, "Absolutely." "Can you stay late?" "Sure." "Are you okay helping with this?" "Yep." "Do you have enough bandwidth to handle this one other project?" "Yeah, sure, I'm fine." Are they dependable? Are they engaged? Are they a team player? Maybe, but they also might be stretched really thin and you're not recognizing it because sometimes that knee jerk reaction to just say yes is coming from a place of stress, that it's actually a survival mechanism that they are implementing because they're worried about what does no mean. Maybe they're worried if I actually look you in the eye and say, "No, I can't stay late. No, I can't help with that." Are they concerned? Have we created a safe culture where our people can set those healthy boundaries? Not every yes means yes. I mean, yes can mean I want to. Yes can mean I absolutely have the capacity. I agree to do this. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to be challenged. But a lot of times, yes can be I don't want to disappoint you. I'm afraid of looking difficult by saying no. I don't feel safe disagreeing with you. Or maybe it's, I don't know how to say no. There are some people out there that just genuinely, like, I look at them in love and just be like, "Here's an easy response for you. No." Say it with me. It's not hard, but for them, it's really difficult. And they carry a level of guilt every time they say no. And maybe a yes is also just I'm looking for your approval. So I'm going to say yes and hoping to catch your approval to stand out because I want to grow. So agreement isn't the same as commitment. I can agree to do things, but not be fully committed to what it is that I'm doing, to not really be passionate about the mission. And what we want to understand is, what do you mean that this is a stress response, right? Most of us, when we think stress response, is we're thinking fight or flight, right? Either they're going to fight back and say no, or they're going to take off. And we do see those. Those are kind of the two extreme, but there are some other stress responses that pop up that you might not be as familiar with. Some people have heard of freeze, but there's this fourth one known as fawn that I see pop up a lot more frequently. And usually they'll be in that stress level fawn stage before they take flight. And that means going to another company, losing that employee that was always your yes person. And I've been there as a manager where I had that employee that I just relied on because I knew I could come to them with anything and they would take it on. What I didn't realize as a manager is I was leading to their burnout. I wasn't taking the time to go, why are they saying yes? Is this out of stress? Is this out of fear? Is this because they want to grow? Are they looking for a new opportunity? And that's what I want us to focus on is when is it a stress response? So just let's quickly review those four stress responses. The first one is fight mode. Most of us know this one. It's confrontation. When I'm threatened, I'm going to face it head on. And it shows up like anger or irritability. It could be this need to like take control. Sometimes we work with people and they won't relinquish control of certain projects. And I have found some of the best managers and leaders that also tend to be a little over controlling, they're doing it out of a place of fear. And so figuring out where that fear is based is really helpful. Also, sometimes that passive aggressive behavior can also be that. Their internal message is if I fight hard enough, I'll survive. Flight is I'm trying to escape and avoid this danger. This is I am out of here. But it can also show up as anxiety or panic. It shows up as overworking or over planning. So if you're somebody or you have somebody that works for you that has plan A, B, C, D, all the way to like double G, that might be out of a place of actual flight mode. It's a stress response. They tend to avoid confrontation altogether. They'd rather just take it on or make themselves seem smaller so that they don't have to deal with it. That is flight mode. And that internal message is if I just run fast enough, I'll be safe. The next one is freeze. So we've all experienced this. Like you may be walking down the street and you drop a dish or something and that shatter happens and we all immediately like inhale and we go like possum mode. Like we just totally stop until we figure out, oh, that was a glass over there. That's what happened, right? That momentary freeze. Sometimes people get stuck there, especially in extreme circumstances. That's why there are people that they've had confrontations or they've been assaulted and people go, why didn't you fight back? Because fight wasn't their stress response. They went into freeze. They became numb. They disassociated from the event that was happening. They had a hard time making a decision. Do I scream? Do I run? Do I fight back? They didn't know what to do. So they just froze in place. And we see this show up in the workplace sometimes as procrastination. If you have an employee that you've given a big project to with a tough deadline, and you sit there and maybe we make those snap of judgments of they're a procrastinator, they're not getting it done. Sometimes it's out of stress that they don't know where to begin. They get overwhelmed every time they start on the project. And it's actually not because of a laziness or time management. It's because they're so stressed out, they can't get their brain to really process what the next step is. Their internal message is if I don't move, maybe the danger will just pass by. And now that leads us into the fourth one where we're going to spend a little bit more time today, and that is fawn. This is if I appease the threat, I will avoid the harm. So we see this a lot in extreme circumstances, like in domestic violence situations. If I just make them happy, if I keep them happy, then they won't come after me. We people please to avoid conflict. I just don't want to fight with them. And I feel like we've all been there at one time or another. Maybe it was with a family member, maybe it's an aunt or a sibling where it's like you really don't want to take something on, but you're just like, you know what? The idea of the conflict is more stressful to me than just saying yes and doing the thing. And so it's a way to avoid that conflict. It also can lead to us ignoring our own needs and putting others first. So this is that employee that's saying yes to everything, and you can see they're getting worn down, things are getting backed up, maybe deadlines are starting to be missed, but they just still keep taking on more and more and more. And they're just not like letting go. They're continuing to step up, they're continuing to volunteer for things. They just have that hard time saying no. And we want to make sure that we're protecting those employees because they're not prioritizing themselves. Their thought process is if I just keep everyone happy, I'll stay safe. An interesting side note is the person that's fawning might also be that person that cracks a joke at kind of that inappropriate time. We all know that person that like the tension is thick in the room. Maybe a confrontation just happened and somebody like kind of cracks a joke trying to lighten the mood. That is a fawn response. It is I need people to be happy. I am not comfortable here with this tension. And that is them trying to get everyone happy because they're feeling threatened. They're feeling overwhelmed by that tension. So, how fawn shows up a couple other ways: that people pleasing under pressure, so saying yes to every request. Over apologizing is another one. If you think somebody is constantly apologizing, even for things outside their control, like, oh, I'm so sorry that delivery didn't come today, or I'm so sorry they didn't call me back. Like, they can't control whether or not somebody called back, but they're going to apologize for them. That's usually a strong sign of high stress and in that fawning response. They avoid conflict by compliance. So they'll agree outwardly with decisions just to avoid the tension, and then privately maybe go to somebody else and be like, I can't believe I'm taking this on. I already have so much to do. Like they might have that person they confide in that they share their real feelings with, but to upper management and to other people, they might just put that smile on their face and be like, yeah, sure, I'll take that on. Not a problem. They tend to overextend themselves to earn approval. So that means staying late, covering shifts for other people, taking on extra tasks just so that they can find your favor or feel valued because they're not feeling valued at their normal pace. They have a hard time setting boundaries, so struggling to say no or to clients, leaders, anyone, which leads to that burnout and resentment. They tend to minimize their personal needs. So you might even see this person skipping their lunches and doing their work at their desk. They might be ignoring their own exhaustion, going over for that fourth or fifth cup of coffee just to power through. And then again, kind of diffusing tension with humor and niceness. So trying to lighten the mood instead of kind of addressing the issue head first. So, what are some of the hidden costs of the false yes? When we have an employee that just says yes as kind of that knee jerk reaction, it's a stress response, then they tend to overcommit themselves. They're taking on more than their time, energy, or capacity has room for. And that leads to higher stress and also resentment. It starts to build. And I've always seen it kind of start to build into more of a resentment. Why don't they ever ask anyone else? Why do they always come to me? Why do they always expect me to take this on? And they don't realize it's their own habits. It's because you're always willing to say yes. You've built a habit now where you, as a manager and a leader, don't even realize you're always asking them for help. And it's because you've built this habit with each other. And then they end up missing deadlines, work quality suffers, they get burned out. And then you, as the manager or leader, get shocked because they just throw in their 2 weeks' notice and quit. They just can't handle it anymore. And rather than coming to you and talking to you about it, they just throw up their hands and go, I'm going to go somewhere else. Unfortunately, that problem of overcommitting and people pleasing tends to go with them. So, what can we do? First and foremost, we as leaders need to make sure we are not accidentally rewarding burnout. So I have seen it in organizations that, employers will call it out when somebody stays late. Hey, I want to recognize Mike for staying late last night and getting this project over the finish line. Hey, you know what? They're my go-to person. They never push back. They always say yes. We recognize that. When we recognize taking on extra assignments, hey, we want to recognize a person for taking on more. Answering calls after hours. If you have developed a culture where, oh, yeah, well, I talked to so and so at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., when it was well over hours, you're setting a standard where that's what's expected of everybody. Whenever you make comments about, oh, this employee never complains, that's why we like them. Or they're always fixing other people's problems. Oh, I know I can depend on them. When something goes wrong, oh, get so and so to do it. They're great at that. They can always fix it. They're my go to person. You start to create a culture where people want to be that person because that's the person that's getting recognized. Not to say that we shouldn't reward people that put in the extra effort, but we shouldn't make the extra effort the standard, that that's what has to be done to get any kind of recognition or value. We need to make sure that we're rewarding a healthy level of commitment and not unlimited availability. If you are not sure if the yes you are getting is out of compliance or commitment, you need to ask yourself a few things. First and foremost, what is the body language saying? Not just the words. True team players who want to step up, who want to take on more, who want to grow, when they say yes, they will look energized. They'll look enthusiastic. They'll look confident in their volunteering. People who are fawning, they'll give you that tight smile, like, yeah, I'll do it, right? We've all seen that. Maybe they'll avoid eye contact. Maybe they'll show some subtle tension even while agreeing. Maybe they'll even start to push back. You'll see them like thinking, well, can I take that on? I mean, I have these things. Yeah, I guess I could. It's not really that commitment. That's more of a compliance. They're trying to comply with you because they're just trying to keep you happy. Look for pattern. It's one thing if somebody wants to put in occasional help, right? When somebody wants to stay in, no, I want to see this project succeed. I'm engaged, I'm enthusiastic about it. I want to be a team player, I want to help. But if it's constant and it's to the point of self sacrifice, now it's become a stress response. And when we see that pattern, that it is consistent day after day, week after week, it's not just during the hard push seasons, it's all year long. That needs to be a red flag. Check their follow through. Willing employees will complete their tasks and they'll be present, they'll be engaged, they'll take pride in it. They won't go looking for your approval and your validation because they know they put in the work. They know they did a good job. They have that confidence. Whereas somebody who's fawning, they often show fatigue. They're a little anxious about it. They might even show some resentment. These are the people that are in come to see, like, did you like what I did? Was that okay? Was it good enough for you? If they're coming to you and they're giving that kind of language, they're not confident. And again, they're trying to people please. They need that recognition. They need proper praise. The next one is ask about their motivation. Ask them, hey, I came to you about a project. What made you want to take that on? What made you say yes? That really reveals their intent. Oh, I want to learn how to do this. Or, you know what, actually, my kids are busy this week and I'm just going to be home alone. So this gives me something to do and gives me that time. I've got time this week to take it on. Something else was slower. Another project got pushed back. So I had the ability. That's the kind of answer we're looking for. If it's centered around fear. If you go, hey, why did you take that on? And it's well, I didn't want to let anyone down, or I was worried you get mad if I said no, or, I'm worried who else will do it. That is a stress based yes. That is not a committed yes. That is more of I'm trying to be compliant and complacent with you. And then the last one is balance praise with permission. Don't just celebrate those who go above and beyond, the person that stays late, the person that's always taking on more. Also highlight those who know their limits and ask for support. Hey, so and so came to us and said that she needed support here. She raised a concern about, not having proper tools or support in this, and we appreciate her coming to us and being honest and bringing this to our attention so we could get her the right resources and get the job done. That should get just as much praise and recognition as the person who stayed late. If we're only praising the people that stay late and are doing it all by themselves and burning themselves out, that's the type of culture we're going to create. But if we recognize the people that weren't afraid to raise their hand and say, hey, I need help, we should celebrate that bravery. Hey, so and so said they need help. They brought an issue to us. We appreciate that. If you see anywhere else where we have issues or you need support, please bring that to us. We want to help you. You'll create a culture where people will look for support, set healthier boundaries, and not burn out. So, reviewing this false framework, the first thing you want to do is pause. Don't automatically accept that immediate yes. Let your employee have a minute to think about it. Because again, if it's stress, a lot of times, can you take that on? Yeah, sure, no problem. That's a knee jerk reaction. I know for me, I get hyper focused and I don't know about you, but like my kids will come to me and be like, Mom, can I do this? And I'm just like, yeah, sure, honey, whatever. And then an hour later, they're like eating a bunch of junk food. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, well, you said I could. I was hardly paying attention. I was so hyper focused on something else. The automatic yes just came out. So pause. Make sure your employees are actually understanding what they're agreeing to and that they have the capacity. And that comes into number two. check. Ask them, what else do you have on your plate? What other projects are you working on right now? When we went over the cost of ambiguity a few weeks ago, I mentioned to the group that one of the biggest issues I see with my one on one clients who are trying to optimize their day is they'll say they really don't know what to prioritize. That their managers come to them all the time. It's just like, hey, can you take this on? Hey, can you take that on? Can you also do this? And they say yes, but then they sit there and they have this laundry list of things to do and they have no idea what is most important. Like, what's the thing I should do first and put as number one priority and what can wait? And so check with them. What else do you have on your plate? What should we be prioritizing? Does something need to come off? And then give them that permission to be honest and answer safely. If you don't have capacity right now, if so and so has you working on another project that takes priority, totally okay. I'll go ask the next person. But we need to give them that permission to say, not right now, and then clarify. If something new gets added, if they say, yeah, I'm going to take that on, okay, if this is becoming the priority now, if you're coming to me and saying, hey, can you take this on? And I go, well, I've got these other things. Well, let's look at it together. Let's clarify what should be number one priority for you and what can we move? What can we punt? What can we maybe delegate to somebody else? But it's you as the leader who needs to help work them through that because they don't know your thought process. They just know the boss is coming to me and asking me to do something else. And I need to know that it's a safe place and I have permission to push back and discuss what's priority. So, honest conversations are what's going to create those healthy teams. Make no safe without eliminating accountability. So, when I talk about making a psychologically safe work environment where your people can say no, it does not mean we're creating a culture where they can do whatever they want and they can pick and choose the job. They agreed to do a certain specific job. They have a job description. There are certain duties that need to be met. If they can't meet those duties, then maybe they're not the right person for the job. We still hold them accountable. And we're not saying that we're not going to challenge them. We want people to be challenged. We want them to grow. And it's not about not being stretched or having those difficult seasons. There's going to be seasons that are going to be more difficult than others. So we want to make sure that those, even though there are those seasons, they only last the season. They're not all year. So when we are talking about figuring out if our people have capacity, we also need to reframe how we ask. So rather than just going up to somebody and going, hey, who's willing to stay and help? Ask who has capacity to stay and help tonight? Who wants to stay and help tonight? Not who's willing or who's able, but like who really wants to try to learn something new and take this on. And again, create that culture where it's okay to push back and say no. Ask, can anyone take this on last minute? Present it to the team. Don't just go to that one person that always says yes. Who has the bandwidth for an extra event or who wants to pick up extra shifts? Is there anyone here who's looking to make a little more money or to take on an extra project? We come into that busy season. Hey, we need everyone to pitch in right now. It's an all hands kind of situation. Go to them. Hey, I know it's busy. Let's talk about what each person can reasonably handle and figure it out for what's the priorities for the day and focus on a day at a time. Sometimes when we look at those bigger project scales, it can be overwhelming. So take it a day at a time. Like, what can each person handle today? What are we going to focus on tomorrow? And let's end it there. And then thanks for always saying yes. Let's avoid that one. Hey, I appreciate your effort, but like make sure you're also taking care of yourself. As a leader, you should be having that conversation. What do you need? How can I support you? If an employee stays late and is working till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, are you allowing them to sleep in the next day and maybe come in a little bit later? How are you offsetting, those extra hours and that extra time? Are you doing something so that they can take the time off that they need to recover, especially after a really hard season or a difficult project? So our key takeaways for today is a yes isn't always a commitment. Sometimes it's just a stress response. People pleasing can be a response to stress or a perceived threat. Again, they're worried. If I say no, does that mean I'm going to be passed up for a promotion? Somebody else is going to outshine me. My boss will get upset with me. And leaders can unintentionally reward overcommitment by constantly just calling out the people that want to stay late, or put in that extra effort. We also need to reward those who know their capacity is willing to raise their hand and raise issues and concern and ask for help and support. We want to make sure that we have an honest capacity conversation, that we're talking to people about what's on their plate, what can they reasonably handle, and help them make the priorities in the right order. So the goal isn't about getting more yeses or more nos. It's just about being more honest with each other and what we can all reasonably handle. If you enjoyed this discussion, I'm happy to go deeper with you. You can use the QR code on the screen to book a call. I do offer one-on-one coaching. I work with teams. I work with other leaders. So if you're thinking like, you know what, we kind of have a culture where a lot of our managers are really rewarding that overwork that's leading to the burnout in our organization. And this would be really helpful for them to know and them to learn. I'm happy to come in and do a workshop, coach any of your managers and leaders about how to recognize those signs for burnout, how to recognize when that yes is a stress response so they can start to have those nice, honest, open communications. Our next leadership webinar is going to go a layer deeper. So when I'm fine isn't fine. You know, it's one thing to have stress, it's another thing to be burned out. But then a lot of this can be kind of a slippery slope even into mental illness. You know, when people start to experience helplessness or they start to experience like disconnection from others and loneliness. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing these issues before we get that far. And so I want to discuss with you, you know, how do we have those hard conversations? Because a lot of us will go, I'm not a therapist. I don't feel qualified to have that conversation, but it's a conversation we should have. We're with these people 40 plus hours every week. It's important for us to be connected to them and see when they're struggling and have that conversation so that we can get them the help they need, whether that's through an EAP or some other outside resource. So this time I will open it up for questions. I'll check the chat. If you haven't connected with me yet on LinkedIn, you can do so here with the QR code, or you can email me. We are at time, so I will let you all get back to your lives and work. The replay for this webinar will go out later this afternoon. If you want a copy of the slides or want any other information, please feel free to reach out to me either through LinkedIn or via my email here. So thank you all very much.